People of Earth, we have come to upgrade your cosmic consciousness. DNA activation ready. In 3, 2, 1.
Hi, welcome to Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership. I'm Craig Anderson.
And I'm Lou Quinto.
Lou, today we have a great interview teed up with Lynn Zettler, who is an executive coach, but an expert on accountability. And we've talked about the importance of being clear with your vision and how you communicate your expectations. And so Lynn's going to come on today and really talk about ways that leaders can improve how they hold their employees accountable.
Fantastic. Can't wait.
All right, well, let's go to our interview with Lynn Zettler. Lynn, welcome to Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership. We're so glad to have you here today to talk about accountability.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Lou. Glad to be here with both of you.
Glad you could make the time to be with us.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, Lynn, before we get started, why don't we did a little bit of an intro for you before we started, but tell everybody a little bit about your background and what we're going to be talking about today with accountability.
Sure. I'm Lynn Zettler. I own Core Impact Coaching. I am a executive coach with a little bit of a weird background. I'm actually a science person. I have a chemistry degree. I worked for the Dow Chemical Company for 20 years and in intellectual property management. So a little bit of legal as well, and just absolutely gravitated towards leadership and training. And so after 20 years, just decided, you know what, this is what I really am born to do. And so now I've been doing, this is my 15-year anniversary, by the way, for Core Impact Coaching.
Congrats.
Thanks. So yeah, so I'm really excited. I work a lot with medium-sized business owners, also leaders within large corporations and medium-sized businesses. But it's all about, it all comes back to accountability and communication.
Excellent. And I know that that's been a real focus of yours, is the area of accountability. Full disclosure, for many years, Lynn was my executive coach and helped me tremendously grow as a leader. And, here we are, Lou. I'm now self-actualized through all that coaching. So that's
there you go.
So Lynn, are you saying if there's any faults, they're his own problem? They did not come from you, right?
Oh, successes and failures are always your own, never the coach's. Never.
Don't the IT people call that user error?
Oh, wow. All right. Well, so enough about me and all my dark past and my successes and failures, both successes and a lot of failures past that. But what we want to talk about today is accountability. Lou and I have talked on a lot of different episodes about the challenges of leadership and how hard it is with all the things that we have to do, especially now, trying to hold people accountable and lead people still through this format, through Zoom and through Microsoft Teams. So why don't we just kind of start from the beginning? When we're talking about accountability, how do you define accountability, Lynn, for the work you're doing?
Good question, because I think if you asked people, you might get different answers on what accountability means. I think that the knee-jerk reaction is, accountability is, your self-accountability, holding yourself accountable, doing what you say that you'll do. I tend to look at it more from a leadership perspective and say, to me, I call it being an accountability leader. To be an accountability leader means that you not only hold yourself accountable as a leader and set that as the standard, but you also lead your people in a culture of accountability so that they not only want to follow you, but they want to meet or exceed your expectations willingly. That's the kind of wonderful accountability culture that you need in order to have a team that performs that well.
That's great. Lou?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Tell me, why is accountability, Lynn, such a problem for leaders? Not only, as you said, for themselves, but accountability through the people that report to them as well, through delegation, through project work and things like that. Why is accountability such a problem?
I think for several reasons, and it is a problem. It keeps us all employed, right? It is a problem everywhere. That, like I said, accountability and communication, Because number one, and I always say this too to people when I'm working with them, you got to look at your leadership first, because most of the time you have failed in some way to communicate what success looks like. Now, I know that's not going to be across the board, but that's always where I look first. How clear were you when you requested this task or project or whatever it is? How clear were you with them about what success looked like and when it was due, and what they were supposed to do if they had any issues, right? A lot of times I think leaders are very overwhelmed. They have a lot of work to do. They've got a lot of people, and and there are some people you can do this where you can throw it over the wall and say, here, take it and run with it. If you're lucky enough to have people who can do that, that's fabulous. Let them go, delegate away and let them go. But you have to look at your other people who don't have that necessarily, they don't have that makeup that
Right.
they can do that. They need other things. And you need to figure out what it is that they need. They need more direction. Do they need, everybody needs due dates. I think that's the number one issue. People say, oh, I need that report. Can you get it to me? Well, sure. I'm thinking Friday by the end of the week. And you're thinking, I need it on my desk at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
You gotta say that. We're not mind readers. That happens way too often. And I'm guilty of that as well. We fall into that trap.
Sure. I tell people all the time, if you don't assign it to someone and if you don't give them a deadline, it's not going to get done. And so, yeah, it's something, as you said, in my mind, I say, get it to me. And I've got a date in my mind or a time in my mind, and you've got a date or time based upon the things that you're juggling on your list of things to do. Okay, where can I fit it in? And there's really never that communication. And as you were talking about accountability, two things came to mind real quickly. One was, I kept seeing Blanchard's leadership, situational leadership model in front of me as you were talking about, okay, now based on the person, do I need to give instruction, hold their hand, have small little bite-sized goals, or is it the person that I could just dump it on and say, here it is, go for it, do it, and get it taken away from. And then the other thing you talked about was creating that vision. And we've talked about vision at the corporate level in past podcasts, but we also need to talk about vision when it comes to tasks, so that when you and I are sitting down and talking about something, we both have a vision of what that finished product will look somewhat like, and we have to agree on that. And then there's that communication aspect. So as you were talking, those were the three things that came into my mind very quickly.
Yeah, and I want to also highlight a word that you said there, agreement.
Yes.
That's another problem that
Right.
leaders have, is they think because they've said it, and I've said it once, that it will happen.
Right.
And you always have to make sure you have agreement, commitment that they'll do it, that they agree they can and they will. And too many times, again, it's just fire off an email, assume it's going to get done, and that person's overloaded. They haven't even had a chance to look at your email. And now you're saying, hey, you didn't hold up your end.
Right.
And they never agreed to it. So that's the other piece that is missing quite frequently is, well, are you sure they agreed to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of like marriage, isn't it, Lynn? Where, yeah, I mean, one of the biggest reasons for divorce is poor communication. And if you think about it, that's one of the biggest reasons why employees leave a manager, is because of poor communication. And that's part of that accountability that you're talking about. Yeah,
about managing expectations.
Right.
I did a whole blog about how I failed at managing expectations with my husband once.
Just once?
Yeah, because he was sitting when I left to go do the grocery shopping and everything else, he was sitting on the couch, right, with a honey-do list.
Right.
When I got back, guess where he was?
Sitting on the couch with a honey-do list.
Well, what was
I-
it?
I want to meet your husband, Lynn. I like him already.
I never told him it had to be done right then. He had the whole weekend, right?
Sure. Yeah,
Golf was first, then chores.
absolutely.
Got it. I'm good with that now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, if you want to kick him out of the house, send him here. We'd get along fine.
Oh, man. So Lynn, as this kind of create, you mentioned this at the beginning, this idea of creating the accountability culture. So, we know we want to communicate these things clearly. We want some agreement. We want to make sure we're hearing back, and we've laid all these things out. So then where do we get it right and get it wrong on creating this accountability culture?
Yeah. Well, okay. So we always start with what example are you setting as a leader, first of all, because it always, as you guys know, leadership leads down. So you have to so first off, the leader should be looking at themselves. Where am I holding myself accountable? How am I setting that as an example? Where am I failing, and working on that. But then also, you have to, as a team, right? You have to show that you're holding people accountable so that your team members who are just kicking it out of the park, they don't get disillusioned because you're not holding other people accountable, right? So-and-so is not doing such a great job, but you're not doing anything about it. So there has to be that kind of communication and teamwork and insight that people know other people are being held accountable. And it's not just a free-flowing cowboy situation where everybody does what they want and nobody says anything about it. I think that's probably, and what does that look like? You might be asking, what does that look like? It doesn't look like hitting somebody over the head with a club. That's not what we're talking about. But what we are talking about is if during a meeting, someone isn't prepared, that instead of saying, oh, don't worry about it, it happens, we'll catch you next time, you say, hey, it's important to the team that we all are prepared. How about you and I have a one-on-one after this, and we'll figure out how you can get caught up so that the team isn't let down again. It's as simple as that. It can be very respectful. It doesn't have to be an awful confrontational kind of conversation. And then during that one-on-one, you can find out what barriers got in your way. Is there anything I can do to help you? How can we remove those barriers? What's really happening? I'm listening, right? You want to it's that whole communication piece. Give me all the pieces to the puzzle and put them on the table so I can make the right picture. But if I don't have all those pieces and don't know and don't care to find out, it's just, it's not going to be a complete accountability culture, that's for sure.
Yeah, you talk about, being able, not having stuff ready for a meeting. I remember early in my career, I had a manager who was a poor communicator, and we had a meeting and he brought up a topic that no one was prepared for. And he started asking questions and no one had any information that he was looking for. And he literally said, okay, this meeting is canceled. Go back to your offices, drop everything that you're doing for the next 2 hours, and we will meet 2 hours from right now. And you will have all of this information. And we were just looking at each other like, where did this come from? So all of a sudden it rose to the level of importance on your list of things to do. So we've got to automatically drop what we're doing now for the next 2 hours and do that. But that's, again, he was a poor communicator. Yeah. And that happens. I mean, I'm sure I wasn't the only one in the world that's ever experienced something like that. But the fact that he canceled the meeting and said, okay, 2 hours, drop everything you're doing, get this information. This is what we need to work on. So now you talk about, the accountability culture. If I'm a manager, how do I start establishing that culture? Now, I know it's got to start with me as the leader primarily, but how do I get that? As you said, we need to lead down. How do I get my managers to buy into that accountability also to really get this accountability culture clicking?
Yeah, so it's very important that you start with one-on-ones with every one of your reports. Okay. And whether they're seasoned or not, it doesn't matter. Again, that comes down to, how you're evaluating what's needed, for that particular person. But you have one-on-one meetings, you establish what needs to be done. You establish that agreement. You go through a process, and it's very disciplined. You get that agreement. Now, I suggest that you follow up that conversation with something in writing, whether you ask them to, okay, send me an email with everything we talked about and what the due dates are, so that we both have that and can refer to it, right? It's to help us keep track, so when neither one of us forgets.
Yeah.
Or you're the lead, as a leader, you want to do that. Doesn't matter. I think it's better to have them do it, and then you can always say, oh, you forgot, you know.
Right.
Then you have it in writing, and you have it as an agreement. The other thing that I would encourage leaders to do is, at that moment, have a conversation about what if. Okay, we agree. What if something gets in the way? What are we going to do? What do I, as the leader, want you to do? You know, do I want you to call me immediately? Do I want you to fix it yourself? Do I, you know, depending on who they are and what they're capable of. But just having a little bit of that what if kind of scenario also gives them a little bit of a heads up that it's fluid.
Right.
This is fluid. It can be fluid. It doesn't have to be, you know, like I said, a big stick and you're going to get fired if you don't do it this way.
Right.
But it includes and encourages the continual conversation about the performance.
Sure.
You know, so
We all live with Murphy's Law. And even though we've got an agreement, work's going to come up, things are going to happen. Or as I always like to say, stuff happens. And when stuff happens, you need to be able to be flexible and adjust with that. And I think that's important with the agreement, to have that before we implement this. Let's stop and ask ourselves, okay, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
And then coming up with plans to perhaps prevent those things from going wrong before they actually do. And then second set is some minimizing plans. Okay, if this does happen, how can we minimize it on the effect that it's going to have on the ultimate goal of getting this accomplished? So I agree 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
So then part of this, you know, and you touched on this earlier, is the leader's role in all this. And you have, you know, what about the leaders who don't like the confrontation, who feel like any conversation about accountability is by default a confrontation? And yeah, I don't know anybody like that, but if you happen to know somebody like that you may have coached in the past, what is the best advice for them?
The best advice I have actually I have a book, first of all, that I would highly suggest they read, called Crucial Conversations. It is my communications Bible. I love that book. And what it really boils everything down to is that it doesn't have to be confrontational. If you use a tone that is inquisitive and factual and not doesn't put the person on the defense. As soon as you notice someone's on the defensive, you back away and say, here's what I'm intending to do here today. So there are some nuances about how to have those conversations that way, but you definitely can, where you just say, listen, we need to talk about your performance on project Y. Now, here are the facts. Here's what I saw. Tell me more from your side of things. What did you see? What got in the way? What happened? Right? So now it's not, I'm accusing you of something and I want to punish you for it. It's, let's have a conversation about that and help me understand from your perspective what all's going on here. Now, again, you want to end that conversation with another agreement of what you're going to do moving forward, right? Okay, so we solved that problem. What is our agreement going forward? What's the date? What are we going to do if something comes up, right? So they've got a fresh directive, and that's the kind of conversation that you have. Now, if you have a normal, rational human being who wants to please their supervisor, I always say nobody gets up in the morning and says, how can I make my boss's life a living hell today? You know, no one does that. I don't think. At least they shouldn't be employed if they do.
I work for a boss that I think I had that mentality.
But most people want to succeed.
Right.
So if you have that kind of conversation and you treat them very respectfully, they're going to want to work for you and do that.
Yeah.
Now, there's exceptions to that rule, of course.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that too, if you want.
Yeah. Before we do, one of the things that you said, and I think it's important, and it's a tactic that I learned early on in my consulting career, was that when meeting with clients, before everything gets wrapped up, I wouldn't say before everything gets wrapped up, but during the entire meeting, I create what I call an administrative list. And then at the end of the meeting, I cover the administrative list and say, okay, now let me make sure this is what we agree that we're going to do. And at the next meeting, that becomes the foundation for the agenda for that very next meeting. So we're constantly using those administrative notes to continue to perpetuate them, as opposed to writing them down and forgetting about them. We begin the next meeting with, okay, let's review. Where were we on the administrative notes from the last meeting? And so it's sent out to everyone through an email, and that works out perfectly. And so, yes, that definitely, in my mind, would really increase accountability if you did have that at the end of every single meeting. And the second thing that you mentioned, and Craig, this will be familiar from a previous podcast that we had with Croft Edwards, where he talked about emotion being a significant part of that conversation that you're having. And if you go in and lead with your emotion, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, and you're upset, before you even open your mouth, that person is already on the defensive, and they're not going to go and open up to anything. And so, Lynn, you're absolutely right. That approach to that conversation, that a leader really has to understand, how is my communication going to be effective if I allow these emotions to interfere with the reception or the intake that someone's going to have when they get my message. So, okay, Craig, you can continue. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I don't know if you have a response to all that, Lynn.
Well, actually, I was going to say, Lou, I love your administrative task thing there. Do you mind if I add that to my accountability?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. It's something I learned back, Craig, in the early 90s. One of my management techniques. Yeah. And I literally, when I was working with a client, and I still do it today, I have on a side of piece of paper, I'm writing administrative notes. And that's how I wrap up every meeting by, okay, this is what the results of our meeting were and what we need to do moving forward. And then at the beginning of the next meeting, we start off with, okay, where are we? What didn't get done? What do we need more time on? What did get done? What were the results? And so you always have an agenda for a meeting, even if it's a quick meeting. And because as you know, agendas are so important. And that goes back to the accountability part of it too.
We could have a whole podcast around meeting agendas.
Yes.
Lack thereof.
Right.
And just one other quick thing about tone, right? Approaching the best line from that whole book, if you don't want to buy the book, the best line is, "The sky is blue." That's the tone you use when you have conversations that you're afraid are going to be a little contentious. You use the tone as if you're saying, the sky is blue. Nobody can argue with that. Right. So keeping that tone does wonders both in the workplace and at home.
Yeah. Good thing you didn't say the earth is round, because apparently there's some people who won't believe that.
They might argue that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Craig, go ahead.
No, I think that's helpful. And I do know that is a great book, and I use that a lot with my clients, and it really can make a big difference in realizing how you can effectively have those difficult conversations, and that they're not as scary as they need to be. So, and I think you've touched on really well, what we do when they do make a mistake. I think something that was important was also that idea of coming in to see me if things go off kilter. As I had an old boss who used to say, things don't age well. Bad news doesn't age well. And if you know you're in trouble on Wednesday and it's due on Friday, let me know. How can an employee who's watching this, what should they take away if they're thinking about a boss who's maybe not great at giving me all the details, like Lou's boss that he was talking about, that doesn't really give me all the details and then catches me off guard? Is there a way I can kind of reverse engineer this if I'm an employee with a bad boss?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, so as an employee, it would be important. Number one, do you clearly understand what success looks like? Do you need to ask more questions? If he or she didn't give you a due date, ask for one. When do you need this? No, so instead of waiting for the information, you got to ask for the information, and just be very clear, and then repeat in your own words what you think they said so that you can get confirmation that it makes sense. Those would be really important things to do. I know there was an article recently where someone wrote about how to hold your boss accountable. Now, that's probably a whole different ball of wax there. Especially if you have a bad one, right? Because they're not really interested in listening. But the best thing you can do is to set the example yourself, right? In any situation, it's always be the change you want to see.
Exactly.
So set the tone for yourself. And then make sure too that if you have people that you're working with, even colleagues, use those processes with them too, that you're working together on something. Who's doing it? When I think Lou had said something about this earlier, when is someone assigned and when is it due?
Mm-hmm.
So many times you end a meeting and you've talked about all these ideas and there's no action item list.
Right.
Who's doing what by when? No, we're just talking about it, threw it out in the air, and we think it's going to magically happen overnight. We have little genies or something that are working in the office, or elves, but that doesn't happen. So so it's for employees, I would say, follow the same process. And that's kind of the backward way of holding your leader accountable, to make sure you understand what they're asking for, what they want. Ask those questions. That's what I would say.
And Lynn, you bring up a great point, because I always tell people where they always use the excuse, well, if my manager doesn't do it, how can I, make sure it's done? And I agree 100%. Don't expect your manager to change. You need to change, and your manager then will change to the circumstances. Okay. But I always tell people that even if you're a passenger in the meeting, you can take over the wheel from time to time and steer the meeting in the direction it needs to go. If you start a meeting and there's no written agenda, ask, do we have an agenda for this meeting? At the end of the meeting, I heard a lot of stuff that's going on. Do we have any assignments or deadlines? Can we put together a list of action items? All you have to do in a very nice tone of voice, like the sky is blue, you just ask those two questions at the beginning and the end. And as a passenger in the meeting, you can steer that meeting to productivity.
I love that. Yeah. As a passenger. Yeah. Everyone can lead through influence. And that's a very nice way to do it.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well,
I've got one more question. Yeah. In ensuring, that this accountability, what are the benefits, of accountability, a culture within an organization? As a manager and someone who I'm always looking at the bottom line, I'm looking at hard numbers. But you and I both know, and Craig knows this as well too, that there's a lot of stuff that goes on that gets to those numbers. Tell us real quickly the benefits to an organization by having an accountability culture.
Yeah, there are studies that have been done. Oh gosh, I'm not going to remember the name of it'll come to me as I'm talking. The productivity, number one. Productivity is increased with an accountability culture. Because I say number one, it's probably not the number one, but one of the top demotivators is watching other people not being held accountable, and you're busting your balls trying to get things done, working all kinds of hours. And you might get an attaboy every once in a while, but when you see somebody else over there who's just not doing it, that's very demotivating. And you just feel like, why am I here? Yeah. So productivity, turnover, because people leave leaders. They usually don't leave jobs, they leave leaders. And if you aren't leading that way and you're not helping to motivate the whole team, they're going to look for someplace else that does.
Right.
I would say those are the top two things. You're going to lose people, you're going to lose productivity. And then the third one is just, it feels chaotic. You're dealing with problems all the time. Who wants to do that?
Yeah. You're putting out fires all the time. There's no plan. Yeah.
if you have a disciplined approach and people know what's coming, if something happens or if they don't perform, they're much more engaged than if they're guessing and shooting from the hip. Well, I don't know. Will they fire me now? Will they fire me now? Who wants to play that game?
Right. Yep. Good.
All right. Well, Lou, we'll start with you. What are your big takeaways today?
Well, my key takeaway is that Lynn reaffirmed something that I've been doing for a long time, that it's a good thing, and she wants to steal it from me, and that is administrative notes at the end of every meeting. I think that's an important, that truly is a first step in accountability.
Yeah.
It's creating that list of action items. As you also reinforced the word agreement. You have the agreement that this is the deadlines, these are the assignments, the people that are going to be doing that, and that is all part of accountability. Because if you don't assign things to people, they don't get done. If you assign things to people but don't give them a deadline, they still don't get done. So who's going to do what? When are they going to get it done by? That, I would say, is a strong foundation as part of that accountability culture, Lynn, that you're talking about. So that, Mr. Anderson, is my key takeaway.
All right. Well, let's see. My key takeaway one is situational leadership model. I remember that in the early 90s too, Lou, because I'm almost.
You were still in elementary school when that came out.
Maybe, but I think it's so important. And I think you touched on this, Lynn, is how you explain the work to be done and thinking through, as it does in the situational leadership. Here's what I need you to do and how much clarity I have to provide, how much detail, how much time those are things that are important, because as you said, not everybody's at the same place in your organization. There's some people you just toss it over the wall, it gets done, everybody's happy because they know what to do for you. Other times you've got to invest more of your time, but ultimately it comes back to you as the leader, which I think is the big key takeaway for me. Is we can't complain about it as a leader if we're not doing the things we need to do to make sure things move in the right way. So, Lynn, how about you?
Well, first, I got a tool here that I can throw in there. And Gallup is who I was thinking of before. Gallup has done a lot of research on leadership, and they have done a lot of work on accountability and accountability cultures. So you can also get a lot of information there. And the last thing I will say is, if you have to deal with an accountability issue with someone more than 3 times, then you as the leader should probably lose your job.
Ooh, that's cool. All right.
You're not doing your job. You're not home, because if they haven't succeeded after 3 times, there's something wrong. Because either you should be firing them, right? There should be no 4th time.
Yeah.
And it's not a fit, or you don't have what it takes to lead that team.
Yeah.
Well,
Lynn, we don't like to use the word fire. We like to refer to it as alternative career opportunity discussions.
Wow.
New opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a good
First set of skills that are invaluable to us.
Right. Well, Lynn, for our listeners and our viewers, if they want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Very easy. My website is coreimpactcoaching.com. And they can always find me there. I am always on top of my email. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Fantastic.
We'll drop that in the notes. And Lynn, do you have any other things coming up that you might want to talk about? Any posts or any training or anything like that coming up?
Well, I'm currently, like tomorrow, I'm kicking off and tomorrow being April the 13th, I am kicking off an 8-week accountability course. And I do have an accountability 101 webinar that is an automated webinar. So that's available on the website. Right. And if all goes well with this course, I'll probably be offering it again in September. So I'll let you know and see where we go from there.
Fantastic. Well, Lynn, thank you so much. It was great talking to you today.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. It was great. Lou, anything closing comment?
Yeah, no, Lynn, appreciate the comments. I think accountability is an important issue that leaders really need to, particularly in these COVID times when we've got so many people working remotely. We need to make sure that those assignments and those deadlines are communicated effectively, because that creates that accountability. So more now than when we were all in the office. So.
Right.
Yep.
Right. I agree.
So, but thanks for being with us today, Lynn. We appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Well, Craig, that was a great interview, as I expected, with Lynn. She gave us a lot of good information when it comes to creating accountability, not only for yourself, but also as a culture within your organization. And I think it's something that everyone should strive for, because the thing that bothers managers the most are those tasks that go undone.
And what we now know is the first place they need to look when that happens is right in the mirror.
Absolutely. Turn that mirror right around on yourself. So good. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership with our discussion about accountability. And if you like this, please like, share, subscribe to Q&A, and let people know that we're out here. In addition to that, please leave some comments in the comments section, so that this way, when people are searching for podcasts on leadership skills and business management, that there'll be some comments that they can see what Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership is all about. In addition to that, don't forget, we are available on all of your major podcast platforms. So until next week, keep your hands washed, keep your distance. I'm Lou Quinto.
And I'm Craig Anderson.